Welcome back. Later this week, the nation will mark the 50th anniversary of an iconic civil rights event, the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. It was there, of course, that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his famous I Have a Dream speech. Joining us now to talk about the 63 March and this week's observance, D.C. Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton. Welcome back.
Always good to be with you, Bruce.
Always good to have you here, and especially good to be able to talk with you about an event that for many was part of our history text, literally. For you, something that's from your own personal life experience. You were at the 63 March on Washington. Give us a sense of what impact, curious of course to know what it was like to be there, but in the days and weeks that followed, was there a sense that this was a moment this was a significant moment in a very significant process that the nation was going through?
Well, let me tell you how significant for me. I was in Mississippi in the Delta with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, a law student. And I got a call about something we had been waiting for. It said, Eleanor, the march is going to take place. Bayard wants you to come and be on the staff. I had been organizing, I've been doing voter registration. I left and was on the staff of the March on Washington. Now, we had no idea that this would be the biggest march in memory. There had never been a march this big. All we knew was there was no precedent for it, and we had to get the buses, we had to fan out and talk to every conceivable kind of group. We had to in turn get them to fan out. And it was the summer of '63. It was one of the high points of my life. There was great anticipation. We had no idea how many people would be there. The Kennedy administration was very much against it, although our movement had been extraordinarily nonviolent. They didn't know whether or not there would be a counter group coming up. But what was most important for the march and its success was one Bayard Rustin. Bruce, I do not believe there was another human being who could have organized that march. He had all of the right ingredients. He had himself been a resistor. He's a pacifist, refused to fight in World War II, been on freedom rides in the 40s, had been in the labor movement, was my version of a public intellectual. There were a group of young people who every time we came to New York would be with Bayard. Sometimes it was to hear him speak. Sometimes it was just in a small group. That's how I got to be on the staff in the first place. And of course, what is now being recognized is that he was a gay man. Mm-hmm. And it was no secret. And that was used against him, but A. Philip Randolph and the civil rights organizations, when Strom Thurmond approached the Senate floor with Bayard's sexual orientation and record. He had something of a record based on his sexual orientation. At that point, when there was no consciousness about sexual orientation as a right, the civil rights groups stood fast and stood behind Bayard, and well they might have. They could not have replaced him.
And he is probably not the household name he should be, but there's been some great scholarship on him, his life, his work, his contribution, and anyone interested in this topic even a little bit should pursue some of those writings.
I organized the letter writing from the Congress so that the President has announced that Bayard Rustin will get the Medal of Freedom, and he will be recognized posthumously.
A terrific thing. What, and I use on purpose the full name, the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. Fast forward to today, to the observances coming up. What mission should they have?
Very important. The first theme of the march was the March for Freedom. Bayard insisted, look, we want something. And what we wanted most then was, this is quite ironic, for me, we wanted an equal employment commission. And he insisted that it be for jobs and freedom. You didn't want to say for an equal employment. And it should be noted, especially for those of us who are coming to the 50th anniversary of the march, that a year later, the first civil rights law since the Civil War with any enforcement powers was passed, and it had the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission.
Which you chaired.
15 years later, almost 15 years later, that I'm in the streets for it. I could have not have dreamed that I would in fact head the commission. As you say, fast forward. People will come with many demands. It's not like the coalition we had of 6 civil rights organizations. We fanned out in many directions. But I can tell you 2 demands that are going to be there for sure. One is to revise the Voting Rights Act so that it is again worthy. As you know, it was struck down, or at least a part of it was struck down, and if it's not revised, it will be useless. And the second, and perhaps particularly visible, demand will be to get rid of these stand-your-ground laws. There is no question that these laws that have spread across more than 20 states put every black man in jeopardy. It's you and the perpetrator. And your black skin and the perpetrator is what it's going to amount to. If there is any appropriate memorial for Trayvon Martin, it is to sweep those laws out of the books. Though Zimmerman waived the stand-your-ground defense, the stand-your-ground defense was in the instructions from the judge, saying that if you found he was standing his ground,